Grip socks are great, and now they're even better with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Better fit, moisture wicking, amazing comfort, and all the extra grip you need. Choose from 10 different colors for just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
It wasn't that long ago that I made the claim that the Adidas Predator is back. And I know not everyone's going to agree with me on that, but based on the wants and needs of the average modern day football boot consumer, I think what Adidas introduced in the Predator 20 Mutator generation was something that was worthy of bearing the Adidas Predator name. Unfortunately, and I'm very sad to say this, the Predator is dead once again. Like, they really messed this one up. Ladies and gentlemen, the new for 2022 Adidas Predator Edge Plus, the top-end laceless option in the new lineup, bearing a retail price of $275, the replacement for the Predator Freak Plus, and a football boot that does do some things extremely well, but it does more things extremely poorly, shockingly so, to the point where this is one of those football boots that I just can't quite understand what they were thinking, or if they were thinking at all. We have to hold the big boot brands to a high standard, and when it comes to the Three Stripes, who arguably make one of the best football boots currently on the market between the X-Speed Flow Plus and the X-Speed Flow 0.1, there are absolutely no excuses for what these ended up being. And if you were interested in picking up a pair for yourself, the information that I'm about to share in this video might change your mind, or at the very least give you a much better idea of what you're getting into. So if you're interested in learning more, including how they fit and feel on feet, please stick around. And if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you don't have to pay full retail. You can get them below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. And as always, guys, if you appreciate the brutally honest reviews rather than tiptoeing around the marketing, please don't forget to support this one with a like, and don't miss out on my reviews on all of the latest football boots of 2022 by hitting that subscribe button along with the little bell notification. So to start things off, I typically don't like to talk about the way a boot looks, especially when it's a new release, because everyone's going to have their own opinion, and opinions do change over time as we get to see more and more colorways. However, in the case of the Predator Edge Plus, I think the look of the boot is pretty important to note because it's a big reason why I don't think these are very good. If you look at the shape, the silhouette, the outline of this product, it is foot shaped, but it has a very concept boot shaping to it. If you've ever seen one of those drawings of a football boot during the design process, it's going to have these aggressive, sharp lines similar to this one has as a final product. And the reason why that's not a good thing is because the upper is super stiff and the laceless system allows for next to no adjustability at all, meaning that unless you have this cartoonish shaped foot, which very few people have, you're going to end up with a quality of fit that is well below average for a top-end model, and honestly, one of the worst fitting Predator models of all time. For all the breakthroughs and positivity that I've shared in regards to laceless football boots from the Adidas brand as of late, this is not just one step backwards, it's 10 steps backwards. Just like the Predator Freak Plus it replaces, the upper of this football boot is made from prime knit, and it looks to be a pretty similar weave based on what you can see from the outside. However, the liner has been changed in that it does seem to be a different material. It is not soft at all, and for whatever reason, for how thin this upper is, it is remarkably stiff. If you guys can listen in on this one, it just has a really hard feel to it, and I'm not sure what they've done. I'm assuming it's down to how they've glued all these different layers together, but because of this, you have this unusual shape along with a stiff material and no way of adjusting the football boot, although it must be said that the Edge 0.1 with a lacing system doesn't really help its cause all that much. But the end result is a football boot that has this predetermined shape that your foot kind of sits inside of and then nothing else changes, which just makes for a fit, feel, and general lockdown experience that is well below average from what you expect from a top-end football boot that ideally you want wrapping your foot as closely as possible. This does not have that close wrap around your foot sensation. You're also going to find that you have their zone skin elements scattered across the upper. This is what replaces demon skin from the previous generation. So instead of little spikes, you now have these long SL rubber fins. They're made out of the same material, a little bit firmer to the touch, but equally as grippy on the ball. And honestly, you have it all over the foot, so plenty of additional grip. And honestly, something that does separate the Adidas Predator line from everything else currently available. If you enjoy having a ton of extra grip on the ball, this definitely provides that, although it's tough for me to say that there is more or less grip when compared to the Demon Skin of the previous 2 generations, because it all just feels pretty similar on the ball. Also pretty cool how they did it in that it's a little bit thicker through the striking area and then kind of thins out in other areas of the foot, just providing more grip. Obviously, there was a lot of talk about the inspiration from the Predator LZ, but these are very Predator Instinct-like in terms of the shaping of the elements themselves, and also in compared to the Predator Edge Point 1. Because the Plus model doesn't have a lacing system, the Predator elements can extend a little bit higher in kind of the area of the foot where you strike the ball, where it's cut a little bit lower on the Edge Point 1. Regardless, there's so much rubber and so much grip across the entire upper, you really don't notice that the striking element is slightly larger, but it is definitely something worth noting because you don't notice it unless you have the 2 boots side by side. So the grip on the ball is great. We expect that from something covered in rubber elements, but what about the fit? What about the laceless system? And quite honestly, it's not really much of a system. All they've really done here is they've put some elasticated prime knit material in a very small section on the lateral side of the foot, kind of giving it this off-centered design where you now have all of this area across the top of the foot where typically you would want some kind of tension, which you're not going to get with a laceless system, now filled in with this really stiff material that doesn't bend well, as you guys will see during the on-feet portion of the video. So all you have as kind of an adjustment factor, if you will, as well as something to hold tension against your foot because of its elastic qualities, is this very small section right here. And honestly, it's a super thin layer of prime knit. There's no other reinforcement underneath, less tension than what was provided on the Predator Freak Plus that it replaces by quite a large margin. And the end result is a football boot that has a predetermined shape, and unless your foot, again, is shaped like that of a cartoon, there just isn't much lockdown or responsiveness from this upper. It just feels extremely sloppy. You've probably heard the saying form over function. That is exactly what Adidas have done with the Predator Edge. They have a laceless system that looks quite cool, but it certainly doesn't function very well. Which brings us to the rear of the boot, where you are going to find an internal plastic heel counter that is nice and solid, and of course a mid-cut design. Unlike the Edge Point 1, the Edge Plus is only available in this mid-cut look. And of course, the cut has been changed quite dramatically from the last 2 generations of Predator, especially the Freak that had this really long tail that I didn't particularly like the look of, but it didn't really get in the way. And if anything, it did kind of give you something to hang on to when you were putting your foot inside of the boot, which wasn't the easiest thing in the world. This cut, however, just gives the boot a very clunky look around the ankle. There is no support from this because there's not really any structure to the sides, even though it looks quite structured. And you do have this little pointy thing at the back, which I don't love that. That is something that does feel like it could potentially rub on the back of your Achilles tendon if for whatever reason it got stuck like this. So something to be aware of, not something I had an issue with, but I just don't like the fact that it's actually kind of sharp at the point. And then they gave us this really nice deep V cut right here, which I assumed would make these easier to put on. That is in fact not the case because there's just very little stretch to the opening itself, and there's absolutely no give to this ridiculously stiff prime knit upper, and there's also not much of a tail to grab onto other than this sharp little tip, which means that putting these on is more difficult than it's ever been on a laceless Predator model, which is really surprising. I thought this was going to help a lot. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Internally, you're going to find a heel liner that's very similar in terms of material used. It's not quite a soft microfiber, but it has that type of feel to it. Plenty of padding, so not necessarily uncomfortable against your heel, but because of the lack of tension from the laceless system, as well as the high volume and wide shape that this football boot has, along with the stiff material that doesn't budge when the entire weight of your body is bearing on the football boot, you just end up with very little tension holding your heel in place. And then of course, the insole is fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. It's the same as what we had on the previous generation, where you can see it does have this kind of soft lining material on the surface, and then it's made from a single layer of this black foam, where you can see they have not changed the tooling in quite a long time because it still says Master Control, which I believe is something that they were using as a code name back in the Adidas Ace days. Which brings us to the base of the boot, where you are going to find a wearable finish to the sole plate. And before we even get into details on the performance and feel of that sole plate, just listen to this. It's just the paint on the surface, but it's very alarming when you put these on for the first time and it makes a cracking sound as soon as your foot bends. Anyways, this is the new Facet frame, which is still a split sole construction like the previous generation Predator Freak, and ultimately something that feels pretty similar despite its very unique kind of fractal design to it. It's still a plastic stud plate with a full-length plastic sole plate that runs from heel to toe, but of course the big thing here is the addition of a weighted metal piece at the tip of the toe for, according to Adidas, increased power on your shots. And again, in a previous video, I talked about Adidas adding weight to Predator models in the past. Last time we saw something like this was on the Predator Power Swerve, which actually had tungsten sand weighted in the insole that could actually flow from the back of the forefoot to the tip of the toe as you swung your foot through the ball, and they gave legitimate statistics on how much weight they added, as well as what the power increases are that you should expect. We're talking like 1 or 2%, but at the very least, they did a study with some statistics, and there was some meaning behind the claims that they were making. In the case of the Predator Edge, they just said that they added some weight to the tip of the toe, never specified how much, and never specified what gains you could possibly expect. It's the most gimmicky element I think we've seen on a football boot as far as technology is concerned in a very long time, and it's totally insignificant to the experience. You don't feel the weight underneath your foot. The boot isn't balanced any differently than a normal football boot would be, and it's just one of those elements that you do not feel at all. It makes no impact, and there's gonna be tons of people that go to the store, try these boots on, don't really know that much about football boots, and will never even realize that this is supposed to be a performance feature. And then finally, the last element of the Facet frame is the FG stud pattern, which is the same layout as the previous generation Pred, but it's now taken on these triangular shape to all of the studs, which is slightly more aggressive. It does feel like it provides a little bit more bite. You could argue it's more speed boot-esque, and honestly, it's one step closer to that classic TRX stud pattern that we all miss on the Predator line. It's a slight improvement over the previous generation, and something that I do like, but not something that saves the boot as a whole, because there's just so many other things that are not very good. And then there's the weight, where obviously this is a new model, so you expect the new model to at the very least not gain weight in the age of football boots seemingly getting lighter and lighter, but Adidas have actually added weight to the bottom, so surely it's heavier than the previous model. We're about to find that out in real time on the scale, both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the outgoing Predator Freak Plus. They weigh in at 8.55 ounces, the equivalent of 242 grams. Change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on the Predator Edge Plus, and you can see that they weigh in at 9.2 ounces, the equivalent of 261 grams. So you're talking about a slight weight increase, basically half an ounce. Is it a noticeable amount of weight? I would say what you're going to notice more so than the weight is the stiffness of the upper and the lack of lockdown, and the fact that this just isn't as good of a football boot as this one is. Now, when it comes to the fit and feel on feet, here's where I can be a little bit more positive, in that when you put these on and stand up, they don't feel that bad. They don't feel that good either, but they don't feel that bad. It's not until you start to move around where you realize, oh my gosh, these are incredibly stiff and really offer no lockdown through the heel at all. I'm currently wearing these with Pure Grip Socks Pro, and grip socks in general are going to be helpful with a pair of laceless football boots, but even with that additional grip up the back of the heel, there's just very little tension and just so much volume in this upper that there's not much holding your foot down, meaning that your heel is constantly sliding, which obviously can result in blisters depending on how much you're actually slipping. If you're planning on buying these boots with extra growing room, good luck, you are going to be swimming inside of them. Even true to size, as tight as possible, like I have these right now, there's still a ton of extra space. And when you bend your foot, you can see the awful folds that you get in the upper. There's just too much material and such stiff material that makes up this entire upper that it just doesn't feel good. The lacing system, or the Laceless system I should say, should have ran much deeper and continued to be down the middle like the last generation of Predator. The way they've done it just doesn't make sense from a fit and lockdown perspective. far as width is concerned, they've definitely widened these boots overall compared to the previous generation, certainly through the midfoot, and then the forefoot and toe box area, it's wider, it's rounder, there's more volume. It's one of those football boots that doesn't really have much of a shape to it, other than the fact that once you put your foot inside of it, that material to the upper isn't really going to expand or stretch or just move with your foot. It just has that predetermined shape, almost like putting on a pair of work boots. It's the best way that I can describe it. It doesn't necessarily feel good, and it certainly doesn't feel soft against your feet. If you have really wide feet, I don't think these would be a great option, simply based on how difficult they are to put on, and in general, just due to the poor lockdown, unless you have the perfect shaped foot for this football boot, which you wouldn't know unless you try them on, they're not gonna fit most people very well. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to order a pair, I would strongly recommend going true to size, as I would in any laceless football boot, but certainly with these, you do not want to buy them with extra growing room. So in conclusion, the Predator Edge Plus is a mess, it's a shame, it's the opposite of everything that I was hoping for from the 19th generation of Predator. I talk so much on this channel about the way football boots are marketed and how some of that marketing can be a little bit deceptive, and I think this is the perfect example of a football boot that was designed with a marketing first direction, where all they really focused on is having as many cool and innovative new technologies that may or may not be effective, and the afterthought was the fact that the boots don't actually fit and feel very good. And honestly, the fit and feel should be prioritized before anything else. That's where I think Adidas went wrong with these.